Hi everybody, my name is Leonore and I'm the music director of the Victoria Symphony Orchestra, and I want to welcome you to this video preview of our upcoming concert, Master Season 4, entitled The Undisputed Masters. Now this concert is concert number 4, but it was actually supposed to be concert number 1. As you all know, many things got canceled back in September according to the wiles of Hurricane Harvey. And we were no exception, so we had to postpone our September concert and move it to March. So if you're coming to our March 24th concert, you're going to be hearing the season opener. And it's a great season opener because it's called the Undisputed Masters. And the reason why I called that was because the composers that are being performed on this are exactly that. They are undisputed masters. They are Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, and Brahms. So you can't get any more undisputed than that. The great symphonic composers of the classical and in the early Romantic period, that's these composers. Haydn first, then Mozart, then Beethoven, and then Brahms. And we're playing some of their great works. So we're going to start by talking about the very first piece on the first half, and that's Mozart's Overture to the Magic Flute. Now many of you know that Mozart wrote many operas, The Marriage of Figaro, Don Giovanni, Così fan tutte, but he also wrote operas that were called Singspiels, and they were intended for folk opera theaters. So instead of having sung recitatives, they had dialogue, and they were usually on lighter topics, and the Magic Flute is one of those. And it has an overture that is a favorite in concert halls, and I'd like to start out by playing the opening. Sorry about that. With these 3 big chords. And these 3 chords occur in the opera, signifying the Masons and the Masonic Lodge. So it's a very slow-moving adagio. But like all of his overtures that start with a slow adagio, it ends up with a nice, quick-moving allegro with the main theme. And that sounds like this. Very quick-moving, accented theme. First played in the violins, and now played in the cello and the bassoon. Now on the basses. And now we bring to the full orchestra playing the theme. Very festive opening overture. Anyway, a wonderful overture. It's about 9 minutes long. And then after that, we'll be featuring cellist Christine Lamprea, who will be performing Haydn's Cello Concerto in C major. Now, it's referred to as the Cello Concerto number 1. Haydn wrote 2 concertos, that one in the D major. But actually, the D major was the only one that we knew about for quite some time until this past century, when it was discovered that there was another Cello Concerto in C major. And so it predates the D major, so thus it's called the number 1, and the D major is called the number 2. And it's a great cello concerto. It features a lot of wonderful techniques and fast-moving notes. And it starts out with this really fun theme. I keep doing that. Come on, here we go. It might sound familiar to you. It's the most familiar of Haydn's cello concertos. Very classical. Now let's move that along and bring it in when the cello comes in. Here we go. Yum, yum. Now there are three movements to this concerto. That was the first. Now let's move over to the second movement. And we'll cue that up. A little slower. Long, long note, then cello. Very relaxed, tranquil. Then we can move on to the last movement, the third movement. And here's what that sounds like. It's a very, as you might imagine, very quick moving movement. Cello gets to show off how fast it can play the notes. Nice long note, then a little scale. Anyway, that's a few excerpts from the cello concerto. And finally, to round off the first half of our concert, we're going to be playing an overture by Beethoven. It's called Fidelio. It's an overture to his opera. Beethoven wrote only one opera, Fidelio, and he wrote this fun-sounding overture. So we'll just play a little bit of the beginning. A quick opening and a nice slower moving section. Very soft clarinets. And then a return of that bright theme. And just like the Mozart overture, there's a slow introduction and then there's the main body of the overture. And I'll just move this along so we can hear a little bit of the main theme of this overture. And the horn. Clarinet. And that's what you heard at the beginning, that bum-ba-dum, bum-ba-dum. It gets bigger. And that closes the first half. I'll tell you a little bit more about this overture Fidelio when we get to our second half. And now we come to the second half of the concert featuring two pieces. The first by Brahms and the second, another piece by Beethoven, which we'll talk about in a minute. But let's talk about the first one, the piece by Brahms. It is his variations on a theme of Haydn. Now we just heard Haydn in the first half in the cello concerto. And Brahms took one of Haydn's themes and made a theme and variations on it. Took that theme and made it his own. So let's just give a listen to the theme. Very stately. A little louder. Kind of like a royal processional. So you heard the theme. Da, 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 da. Now let's listen to one of the variations. So you hear the theme like the oboe. Da, 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 da. So a little different, right? And this is how variations works. Taking the theme and making it just slightly different. Each section a little bit different. Now sometimes he takes the theme and changes it. Other times he takes the bass line and makes something new on top of the bass line. That's a little different. It's a form of variation called passacaglia, where you take the theme, the bass line, and play the bass line over and over again, and you play something on top of it that keeps changing over and over again. So on the very last and final variation, this is what we get. So you hear the bass line, bum, 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 over again. Again, bum, 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 and again, bum, 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 and again. But if you don't pay attention to that, you hear it as a wonderful new piece over and over. And this was the genius of Brahms. You'd never think it was the same bass line over and over again. Anyway, I don't want to play too much and give it all away, but if you hear and listen to it, you won't even notice that, because he takes the harmonies and changes it on top. He takes the themes and changes it while this bass line continues on. Or he takes the theme and just changes it slightly. And sometimes it's in major key, sometimes it's in a minor key, sometimes it's in the original key, sometimes it's in a different key. So he really does some outstanding things. So now let's get to the last piece, and this is Beethoven again. Like we had, Beethoven ended the first half, and now Beethoven will end the second half. We're going to be playing his Leonore Overture number 3. And just like all the overtures you heard before, it starts with a slow opening and then a very quick section to it. And unlike the Fidelio Overture, which has themes that have nothing to do with the opera, this is a little different. Now let me explain something about this overture and the Fidelio. They're related. Beethoven's opera Fidelio, he wrote 4 overtures for it. He couldn't make up his mind. He wrote one and used it, and it was too long and massive. And so he decided to make it a little bit smaller. So he wrote a second one and put that in. But he didn't like that either, and so he was thinking about doing another one. And then another performance of Fidelio came up, and then he decided, I got to write something really quick. So he wrote a third one. And when the performance came, it wasn't ready, so it never got actually performed. And finally, he wrote the last one, the 4th one, and that's Fidelio. That's the overture that you hear in the first half. The one that you're hearing now is Leonore Overture number 3. Now, I don't want to confuse you too much, but the very first one he wrote was actually number 2. Then the second one that he wrote was number 3, and then the quick one, the smaller one that he wrote that never got performed, that's number 1. So it's very unusual, but it was actually composed as 2, 3, 1, and then Fidelio Overture. And that's how the 4 overtures worked out. This sounds very confusing, but the most popular one is actually Leonore Overture number 3, which we're going to be performing as a concert piece. And also, when the opera is performed, Fidelio Overture is played at the beginning, and then as an entr'acte later in the second act, so oftentimes Leonore Overture number 3 is performed. Beethoven didn't actually ask for that to happen, but it's become somewhat of a tradition in many opera houses in Europe for them to do this. Anyway, the Leonore Overture number 3 starts out with a slow introduction with a big long G natural, and eventually it becomes a scale moving down very slowly. Rather ominous opening for this. But the opera is rather ominous because it begins with our hero, Florestan, in a prison, imprisoned unjustly by a man named Pizarro. In fact, as you hear this opening, thinking about this prison, you hear this really beautiful melody begin, right here. In the clarinets. Let's play that a little louder. And that is an aria being sung by our hero, Florestan, the one that is unjustly imprisoned by Pizarro. Anyway, that starts out in the overture, and then later on, let's get to the heroic first theme. Here's the theme. Very positive and heroic. And of course the overture goes on, and there's a section at the very, it's kind of like about in the middle or so, where there's a trumpet call off stage. Now in the opera, this trumpet call is announcing this big dignitary that's coming to inspect the prison where Florestan is being unjustly held. And Pizarro is about to kill Florestan when that first one sounds, and he thinks he can still get the deed done, but a second trumpet call comes up, and now Pizarro's all nervous because that means that this big magistrate is there and he's going to demand what's going on. And so he has to leave, and he doesn't have time to kill Florestan. Now, as all of these operas go on, Pizarro, of course, gets imprisoned and thrown in jail. Florestan is reunited with his love, Leonore, which is the name of this overture, Leonore Overture number 3, who disguised herself as a prison guard, as a male prison guard, to try to help get her husband Florestan out of jail. And she went by the name of Fidelio, which is where the name of the opera comes from. So the opera Fidelio, the name is the name taken by the disguise by Florestan's wife, Leonore. And that's why the other overtures are called Leonore Overture number 1, number 2, and number 3, because they're for the heroine, Leonore, who came disguised as Fidelio to try and save her husband, Florestan. Anyway, it's kind of a convoluted story like many of these opera stories are, but it's delightful, and this overture is wonderful and heroic. It loosely follows the opera. Those 2 themes I played for you, the only themes from the opera, otherwise everything else is brand new. But it's been a wonderful concert piece, and it's a great way to end a concert of the Undisputed Masters. So we hope we'll see you there at the concert. Once again, it's March 24th at the Victoria Fine Arts Center at 7:30, and we will have also a preview talking a little bit about all the pieces, and also a chance for you to meet the artists. So please come and attend this concert of the Victoria Symphony Orchestra. See you in the concert hall.